Hi everyone. I think it's pretty much close to time, or we're getting there. So I'll just kind of blabber for a moment to wait till we hit what for me is 4 o'clock. For those of you on the west coast of North America, I think that's 1 p.m. And then if you're in the UK, probably 9 p.m. if you're still awake. But here we go. So, welcome to this live session that is all about using a yoga strap in your personal practice, but also ways you can incorporate it into your teaching. So, one of the things that I love about teaching yoga is that we can explore certain things, certain ways of doing things, new ways of doing things, different ways of doing things in our personal practice. And then once we're comfortable and confident with that, we get to share that with our students. So this is one of the powerful reasons to have a personal practice at home is to give you the time and space to discover certain things about yoga. It allows you to put your own sort of personal spin on your classes. And if you are teaching a lot of classes in the week, or you've been teaching for quite a while, things can sometimes feel a little stale, likely for ourselves, not for our students. But this can be a way to kind of regenerate and just add a little something extra into some classes, and it doesn't require much, just a yoga strap. Normally when I teach classes online or on like an online platform, I suggest for students to use a yoga strap or to substitute a yoga strap. But for this instance today, we're going to talk about a yoga strap. If you don't have a yoga strap, that's fine. A lot of this you'll be able to do without it, but there'll be some things that you need the loop part for. So if you don't have a yoga strap yet, I think it's a really worthwhile investment to make as a yoga teacher. Just not only for your personal practice, but just to be able to do these sort of experiments so that when you go to the studio, you know how to use those props. Same thing if there's, some interesting props like yoga balls at a yoga studio or dowels. I know Juan just a few weeks ago did a dowel workshop. These kind of things, if you're noticing a theme, like these things are at the studio, but I don't often have a lot of time to figure out how to use them, just ask for one or buy some so you can play around with them at home and get used to using them, and then it's so easy to incorporate into your classes. So here we have Diego's coming to join us, the yoga strap. It's funny how animals just know when there's a yoga mat down. They want to be involved. So, unlooped, your yoga strap likely has either a plastic or a metal buckle. It took me a really long time to figure out how to loop these things, so be patient with yourself if you're finding it a little bit difficult. But you probably can't see, but it's just a simple looping action, and then the strap holds tight. This is the benefit to using a strap versus a band, a scarf, or a belt, is that the strap has sort of a locking motion, and for some of the things we do today, we're going to want that locking motion. You might also notice this is a really, really long strap. I think it's a Manduka. Yes, it's a Manduka yoga strap. One of the longest ones I've seen. This is great because there'll be some tall people in your classes, in your practices, who sometimes the smaller yoga straps just don't work. So something that's really long is helpful. When I'm teaching something with a strap and it's required that we're going to be looping the strap at some point in the class, I always have students do it before we even start the practice, because it can be a little, can feel like a little bit of an interruption if you have to go around and help people loop things. Sometimes I loop the strap for students who are having issues, but it can also be like a nice moment of lightness as well before you move into the posture you're using this with. If you can have a laugh and talk about how these things are difficult sometimes. So we've looped the strap. This is an extra long strap, which is great. For this first thing, I'll show you, if I had a shoulder strap, I'd just leave it open. But the number one thing that I like to use a strap for in my personal practice is something that has the name shoulder flossing. Probably has other names in other places in the world, but for me this is known as shoulder flossing. And what I like to do is to have the strap really wide, wider than my shoulders, wider than my hands would be in a downward facing dog, and then I pull that strap tight. Now you can adjust this as you need to. If you have kind of really tight shoulders, you're going to want your hands further apart. If you have a lot of mobility in your shoulders, maybe your hands can come close together. You'll figure that out more once we get past the head. So I'm going to start about here. First thing is I pull the strap apart. So I want to sort of wake it up and strengthen parts of the upper body. And I might just bring the strap up overhead, and for the first few moments, just pull it apart here. So I can feel, shoulders. You can hear a garbage truck going by. I can feel shoulders waking up, upper back, core is engaged, forearms, those intrinsic muscles in the hands, and I'm pulling the strap apart, and my body temperature is shooting up pretty quickly here. So usually I do this a few times with students, just to this point, pulling the strap apart, lifting it up overhead, seeing what that feels like. And then the flossing part of this comes from when we inhale, lift the strap up overhead, keeping the elbows lengthened, exhale, bring the strap behind us. This doesn't work for everybody because people with shoulder injuries, rotator cuff injuries, anything going on really in the upper body, likely want to avoid this. They can just stay doing this super fun strengthening exercise. But if we're coming up overhead, we're exhaling back behind us, keeping the elbows long. This is the really tricky part for me. Inhaling back up overhead and exhaling the strap down in front. So inhaling up towards the head, exhale back behind, inhale back towards the crown of the head, exhale back down. Now, if I wasn't feeling a lot of sensation, but I am, but let's say I wasn't, I would bring the hands in a little closer. And then I try that again. Inhale, overhead, exhale, back behind you, tricky part. Inhale, up, back overhead, exhale, down in front and behind. And maybe you move in a little more. Maybe there's more sensation you can feel here. Yeah, I definitely can't go back like that. So that's one thing that we're able to do with this is known as shoulder flossing. There's also the option to keep the hands really far apart, further apart, sort of like we did at the beginning. Keep the left arm where it is, and then just kind of bring the right hand behind. So it's sort of a little bit like Gomukhasana arms here, but with a long little amount of length between your hands. You're pulling the strap apart. There's a nice sort of opening at the front of the left side of the chest, and then the right arm comes back up, and then the left arm comes behind. So I imagine in my mind this shape is sort of like Athena's bow. So the Grecian goddess Athena with her bow, and the string of the bow behind us. We're reaching up through the top hand, pressing down through the bottom hand, feeling a nice stretch, and then bringing both arms back up, and then back down, and then rolling the shoulders up, back and down. The last one I like to do for this sort of shoulder flossing, I'll kneel a little bit here for you, is to bring the strap behind, have the hands quite close together, sort of just at the edges of your hips or wider, if that makes sense. So it's sort of imagining we're doing this, the binding of the fingers like we do in a lot of yoga poses, but we're using the strap here just to press into the space behind us. And then releasing. So this is, if you're teaching a class, your sequence is heart opening, shoulder opening, heart chakra, these kind of things. This is a great fun thing to include that maybe a lot of your students haven't done. And by practicing this yourself, you'll start to get the hang of it, and then it'll be really simple to teach this in sort of a public setting. So the other thing that we can do for the upper body, now that we're there, I'm going to unwind my strap so it's unlooped. It's called like the yoga backpack. Again, it probably has a bunch of different names, and there's a couple of ways to do this depending on the comfort in the chest area that you have. So the strap comes behind us, sort of at the tips of the shoulder blades, and then just like a backpack. Watch out for the buckle there. The strap comes behind us, and then we just gently pull down on those straps. And the tail ends of the strap here to open up the shoulders, keep the belly engaged. You can stand or kneel when you do this. And breathing deeply, you can cross the straps behind you as well, and find even a little bit of a different sensation here. So this might be a nice one to stand at the wall or to be sitting in a comfortable position maybe, and to just feel this shoulder opening the straps. There's actually devices you can get. You can buy sort of supports for this kind of idea. So we're just sort of recreating that in our own way. We're using a yoga prop, which is great. So this is one option. The other one I like to sometimes try to do is to actually cross the straps of my chest. This won't work for everybody because we all have a different amount of tissue here in the front of the body, and it can sometimes kind of creep up a little bit there, but I sometimes like that kind of sensation, the support in the front of the chest. To adjust it a little bit, it feels like a seatbelt. And then again, the same idea, just gently tugging down. Not a lot, but just sort of encouraging the body to find a natural opening here. And then you could take a few breaths and really focus on breathing into the strap. And then you could release. So that's upper body. A lot of times in a yoga class, we just think about using a strap in one or two places, maybe a forward fold, a seated forward fold, things like this, or supta, the lying on your back and then one leg coming out, holding the strap, and that's sort of lots of times it. So these are just fun ways that we can additionally use the strap. So another way that we will share from restorative yoga is to loop the strap again. This works great if you have bolsters or blocks behind you. I have neither of those things, so I will just be using it without, but you can imagine that I had those behind me. You make a really big loop because you're going to be wearing this strap. And then the strap comes behind you. And the strap in this instance comes to the low back, more like around your glutes. Definitely not up around the kidneys, so down by the glutes. You can adjust the strap once you have it around the soles of your feet, thinking butterfly here. There's way too much space here, so I'm going to tighten the strap, and that's the beauty of having access to the tail end of the strap and the buckle, is you can adjust it. Definitely don't want that resting on your feet too much. Checking that that is supported here. Now, if I had bolsters behind me, I would lay down onto those bolsters or blocks if I had them behind me in this instance. Hoping you can still see me. I'm going to come down onto my back into supine butterfly shape. And I'm pressing my feet into the strap just so there's a little bit of tautness in it. And what I'm finding here is that there's a lot of sensation in the inner hips, and I feel quite supported in the outer thighs and my outer hips for a change, where I tend to be really tight. So you can make the strap tighter, you can make the strap looser so it's a bit more relaxed. But here's one possible option for using this strap. This would be great as kind of a wind down at the end of a practice, or sometimes I open up a practice in this shape or in a variation of this shape, just so that students can feel supported and relaxed as we come into the class, but that we still, if it's a hip class, then we're starting with that theme of hips in a nice, relaxed way. So I like to do that sometimes. While we're here, and we already have the strap around our low back, we'll explore a supine forward fold using the strap, or it could be supine legs up the wall. With the strap, even it kind of looks like downward dog. A lot of these shapes look the same, and you'll see why there's sort of a V shape happening in the body. So depending on how you're looking at it, you could call it many different things, but I know that I need the strap a lot longer for this. Sometimes it takes a couple of goes for me to remember where I need that to be. I'm going to bring it around my feet. I'm just going to support it at my low back. Do you go left? So you probably see me now. And then I'll come to lie down on my back. And then this is where I bring my feet up, and I'm going to actually tighten this strap a fair bit. So you can imagine if I was against the wall, that this would be legs up the wall, but I'm supporting and really pressing into the strap with my feet for support. I have really chronically tight hamstrings, so this is challenging for me for sure, but I could definitely be here for a little bit. So I get an inversion, which is a bonus for some of us in the world of yoga. I don't have to use a wall, because there's not always access to a wall when you're teaching, and if you don't have access to, because the other option for floating legs at the wall is you, when you don't have a wall, is you pop something under the low back, the sacrum here, like a block or a bolster, so the legs just float. But again, sometimes we don't have enough of those for students, or we don't have a lot of them. So this is an option, is to come into, tighten it a little bit more, this variation using the strap. So making sure it really is around your low back here. Oh, that's nice. And then just letting, as best you can, the prop support you instead of you supporting the prop to stay in place. And it can take a little bit of adjusting and playing around till you figure that out, but it is possible. You can also do what I was doing here and just be holding the edges of the strap for extra support as well, but you might notice a bit of tension gathering in the upper body. So if you can let go, that's a nice way to do it. So that's another way we can use the strap. And then, checking time here, there's one way that's known as, sometimes it's known as the head sling. Diego's dancing. Sometimes it's known as the hammock. I'm just going to let that truck pass. What are we doing here? Great. So there's a lot of things to be cautious of when we're doing this, especially in the head, neck, and shoulders. But assuming that everything's fine, we're good, we can play around with the head hammock, foot hammock, yoga hammock. There is a class on the Your Yoga Flow platform with Nancy, who's exploring this deeply, I think for about 10 minutes. So for further detail and further instruction and opportunity to practice, I highly recommend that. I think it's called the head hammock, or the hammock. But it looks similar to what we just did. Again, it takes a little bit of playing around to kind of adjust to how we need this to be. But essentially what's happening is one foot's coming in, and then the hammock part is coming around the back of your head. Oh, I definitely need that tighter. There we go. Okay. So the opposite foot, I'm just going to move forward so you can see me. The opposite foot is on the floor for support. Some people might lengthen it out. I kind of feel like it needs to be knee bent, foot on the floor for me today. And then there's sort of this really amazing play between this foot pressing into the strap and my head relaxing back into the strap. So you can probably see anatomically why this might be really difficult for people.
The other thing I sometimes want to keep in mind is this is a position that lots of people have naturally in the day when we're looking at our phones or computers. So sometimes in yoga classes, we look to do a lot of the opposite of this, which is opening. So there could be reasons why we decide not to do this. However, what I am feeling, and what you might notice when you explore this yourself, is there is kind of a sense of relaxation in the back because of the support of the strap. So even though I'm in this position that we maybe don't want to be in for a super long time, there is this really lovely feeling. I mean, it feels like a hammock. When your body's in a hammock, it's not really in the ideal sort of anatomical position for the spine, the head, neck, and shoulders, but there's something to be said for letting go and just allowing your body to be held and supported. And maybe that's more of the lesson here, is learning to let go into the props. I'm also feeling a nice gentle stretch in this leg, which kind of feels really lovely for me. So I'm going to bend my knee of my right leg and just switch my feet around here, adjust the strap again, and then do this on the other side. You can see how having a yoga strap like this Manduka one that's very big is important for something like this, because if it was one of the shorter straps, it would be really difficult. I'd sort of be like this, which is not really where I want to be. So this to me feels like it's a really nice variation. And it definitely does have that kind of hammocky feel to it. So I think that if you were choosing to teach this in a class, this is really nice before Shavasana when you're already on the back. Maybe you've been using the strap in some other ways, it's already pre-lubed, nothing needs to happen, and you can just really explore and play with that sensation of hammock. So talking to your students about letting go, about feeling supported, about noticing the play in tension between the foot and the strap and the strap and the foot and all these things, and encourage your students to dive a little deeper into it being a felt experience and not looking for feeling stretch. So that would be maybe the big advice here, would be to work it in towards a bit more to the end of the class, because already just after doing that for a few minutes, I definitely do feel a little different, like a little bit more relaxed and I guess at ease. So another way that we can use the strap is by, this one's a little bit more complicated. So if you see me signal for Juan at some point for assistance, you know where that's happening. But there's a pose on the back that we use a strap for. I'll show you what it generally might look like. Where you're here, you got the strap around the foot, maybe this leg's lengthened or bent, and then the leg's coming out. So sometimes some people are able to do that with the big toe. That's not me, but that might be you. But lots of times we use the strap for a little bit more accessibility for this shape. It's the same shape that we do when we're standing and the legs coming out, the balance pose. There's a way to do this, but the caveat is you need two straps. You might be in a yoga studio, or you might have access to at home, two straps. This is a luxury, so you definitely can't teach this probably everywhere you go. It also takes quite a bit of time to set up, there's quite a bit of adjusting. I would recommend, this is a great thing to do for a private yoga class, especially if you're newer to teaching, where you have the space and the time to help adjust and tweak things. If you've got a class of 40 people and you've never done this before, it's your first time, I could imagine that might be a little stressful. So, what are we doing? First of all, we're going to bring one strap, I'm going to open it up, around my left thigh. So it's around my left thigh. And it's going to go around my right foot. I'm going to tighten that. Feels okay. We'll see what happens. The other strap is going to go around
my upper body. So it's going around, it's like right up around the tips of my shoulder blades. I'm just going to come up to my back once I've got that there. And then I'm going to bring, whoops, the other strap around my right foot. So you can see what's happening here.
I'm going to keep this leg lengthening out and it's pressing into this strap, which is being supported by this left thigh. And then this, I'm going to tighten this a little bit more, this left leg, which is being supported by the strap around my shoulder blades, is slowly going to come out to the left. Pressing into the right foot, pressing into the right foot to really work into this left hip that's supported by the strap. And then the left leg is coming out to the side and it's supported by the ribs, the strap around the ribs, the strap around the tips of the shoulder blades. So one thing to watch for here is if this strap slipped down and it's at my low back or it's at my kidneys, that's going to be super uncomfortable and not great. So making sure it's around these parts of the body that are very strong and supported, rib cage, shoulder blades, thigh, these kind of places. So this is one option. Then you would need to do a little bit of rearranging to switch to the other side. So bringing this leg back in. One thing to think about here, again, I have very tight hamstrings, but some of you might have this leg even closer, so the strap might need to be tighter, and then the leg's coming out to the side. It's going to look different for everybody, but that's sort of how it goes. One's giving me a nod that worked, so that's great. So that's 2 straps. Like this is a lot of straps in a yoga studio. You might have this many, and I definitely recommend playing around with this before you even kind of consider teaching it, because sort of it can get a little complicated and confusing and things need to adjust. So, but it's an option to play with. So say for example, you're teaching a class and there's just 2 people there, and I'll come a bit closer. As a teacher, having 2 people there can sometimes feel a little bit nerve-wracking because it gives you an opportunity to really kind of be with those people and you might not be prepared for it or used to it. And this is where you can pull out some props, you can pull out some straps, some blocks, and you can just play around a little bit more with using those things because you have the time and the space with fewer people to be able to explore and experiment and to help them individually. It's very difficult, and in class of 30 or 40, even 20, can be really challenging to work with props. Sometimes there's not time or space to have all those props around, which is why in restorative and yin classes, sometimes the capacity is lowered. Called TheraBands, the colored bands. It works equally well with TheraBands. The one thing to watch for is just that the TheraBands can kind of come out people's hands and make loud noises and sort of hit them a bit. Oh, one last thing I wanted to show you before we finish is just a little bit of a way to help our rib cage breathing. And another way we use the strap is we loop the strap. You don't need as big of a loop of the strap. And then basically you just think like corset, think belt around your rib cage. And then you kind of want this at around the low ribs. So again, we're not down at the kidneys, we're not up at the collarbones, it's around the low ribs. You tighten it as much as you're comfortable. I like it very, very tight. So sometimes when we're trying to activate this sort of 3-dimensional breath, this breath that moves in all directions, we bring our hands here. The downside of that is that it kind of limits our breath a little bit, and our shoulders and the upper body is kind of lifted up and hunched up. So with a strap around the lower ribs, we're going to practice breathing into especially the sides and the back of the strap. So as you inhale through the nose, feeling that compression against the strap, holding the breath for just a moment, and then exhaling, trying your best or exploring what it's like to maintain that tension in the strap as you breathe out. So we're maintaining the volume and the space in the rib cage as best we can. It's just a fun way of breathing. We use this way of breathing a lot in singing, but it's also a really helpful way to slow down exhales and to feel full expansion on the inhales. So again, you would inhale through the nose. And then as you exhale, try and maintain that space, sort of pressing out gently into the strap and letting the breath just very softly come back out through your nose. And this is something that I do with my students at the start of a practice, a sort of a breath-focused practice. Sometimes I theme things very generically just around pranayama or breath. And this might be a breath-activating practice that we do at the beginning. And one time I had all the students wear those TheraBands. We didn't have belts, so they all just tied a TheraBand around their low ribs. And they were green. Everyone tied a bow, and there were green bows, red bows, and blue bows. It looked really festive and Christmassy, so it can look very pretty as well. But with a yoga strap, it's ideal because it's not going to come loose. But a TheraBand does work here too. So something to explore and to try, especially if you notice that your speaking voice feels a little weak. If you feel like there's not a lot of support for you when you're speaking for long periods of time, this is something to try, because this is known as breath support. When we're maintaining the volume of the rib cage, we're helping to support the breath that's coming out, the speaking voice, the singing voice, the talking voice, so we can maintain vocal longevity. And in future workshops, we'll talk a lot more about vocal production for speaking, because I know that this is a very important part of teaching and one that lots of people have some questions about. So that is to come in the future. But that's it for today, the strap workshop. I hope some of that was useful for some of you, and that it has inspired some different ways to use a strap, or rekindled some ways that you have already tried, and maybe you'll try to bring them into your yoga classes or your personal practice. So that's it from me, and I'll see you all again really soon. Thank you.